Hello. I would like to start off this video by saying that this is a Christian ministry. And the reason why I'm saying this right at the get-go is because I'm not looking to trick you into believing something else. I'm starting this presentation this way because there is an organization out there that is using a front group in order to propagate their religious cult through covert means. And that cult's name is Scientology. The organization that they are using to subtly introduce their wicked system is called the Citizens Commission on Human Rights International. I was introduced to this as I walked through the city one day, where I had discovered this sign. I had started reading it and saw the title where it says, Psychiatry, an Industry of Death, and thought, might be interesting. They rented out this ground floor commercial space for the week and had this whole interactive display, which I thought looked impressive for an organization I had never heard of. Or so I thought. I then saw two men standing at the entrance and was asked, "Can we help you?" In which I said, "Yeah, I just want to check this thing out. It looks kind of interesting." Right away, they were adamant about having me sign their little book with my name and email address, insisting that I did so. I told them that I was just stopping by and I wasn't looking to stay around for too long, in which case I had avoided giving them that information. They gave me these little pamphlets and a magazine with a DVD inside. That was more or less the end of my interaction with them and was interested in looking into the information they provided and the organization. When I got home that night from work, I opened the magazine, and before long I had read on the 5th page that the Citizens Commission on Human Rights was established in 1969 by the Church of Scientology. I thought, oh brother, that was misleading. I get how when most people hear about Scientology, they run for the hills. But I didn't realize to the extent of how subtle they are willing to go in order to recruit more members and to get more money. I don't even know if most of the people in the documentary knew that the CCHR belonged to Scientology. For crying out loud, even Senator Ron Paul was found in this documentary. Even when I was talking to one of the men, they had told me that they were actually a Roman Catholic. I thought, does this guy even know what he's a part of? And thought, man, I should really make a video about this, because more people need to know what this organization is all about. Apparently, the CCHR has even gotten in trouble for entering grade schools and trying to persuade students about the horrors of psychiatry, without telling the parents what they were teaching them and of their connection to Scientology.
Now to the alarming news that our children are being introduced to Scientology-funded programs in our schools and kindergartens without even knowing it. Most recently, 2 human rights groups funded by Scientology sent out information packs and videos without declaring their relationship. One school even allowed a seminar to be held, not realising who was really talking to the students.
Kindergartens across the country recently received this pack in the mail. Catherine Waters, director of Melbourne's JJ McMahon Kindergarten, was stunned by its contents.
So I started reading carefully through the accompanying literature, and it wasn't really until I got to the last page that I recognised there was a connection with the Scientology organisation.
The kit included a warning to parents and a form for them to sign. The form is an exemption against health checks that are carried out on young children at school. The information pack claims the health checks could lead to their children being prescribed mind-altering drugs. The group behind this information pack is the CCHR, or Citizens Commission on Human Rights. At Woodridge State High School, south of Brisbane, parents were stunned to learn 60 children attended a seminar run by a Scientology-funded group known as Youth for Human Rights.
This is mean and sneaky and tricky and, above all, dangerous misinformation.
Senator Nick Xenophon has for years exposed the abuses inside Scientology.
These jokers go on about human rights when I've seen so many people who've been in the so-called Church of Scientology who've had their human rights abused, who've had their lives ruined, who have been ruined both emotionally and financially, and for them to be talking about people's human rights is really a very cruel hoax.
This whole thing about them using some other organization as a front in order to spread their false beliefs reminded me about what it says in Galatians 2 verse 4. As it reads, "And that because of false brethren unawares brought in, who came in privily to spy out our liberty, which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us into bondage." For my research, I did end up watching the DVD I received, and it was pretty bad. The first thing to say is that the editing was just atrocious. We're talking constant annoying transitions with swooshing sound effects, flashing lights on screen, and loud and obnoxious music. The second thing is that they made a lot of claims within this video about mental illness and the history of psychiatry, and while I'm sure that there's a lot of truth to some of the claims that they make, they don't give you any time to think. They just bombard you with one thing after another, and they don't allow you to process what you just heard. Combine this with the lack of citations and exploitative graphic imagery, and it doesn't matter if what they are saying is true, you just feel like you're being manipulated. I had a headache after watching 40 minutes of this. It truly felt like mind control tactics were being used in this editing. Among their claims included the fact that 40% of psychiatrists in Germany during the 1930s were Nazis.
Something like 40% of German psychiatrists had joined the SS by 1933.
In which case, so what? That's not even the majority. In other videos they had produced on YouTube, they actually claim that the Nazis came up with psychiatry.
This documentary contains footage that some viewers may find disturbing. From its birthplace in Nazi Germany, from its birthplace in Nazi Germany, from its birthplace in Nazi Germany.
Meanwhile, they had a whole segment in this documentary that was called Origins of Psychiatry, where they said that it started with the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, also known as Bedlam, in London, England back in the 18th century. One guy even says that these institutions existed even earlier.
Specialized institutions for the mentally ill are beginning to be built in large numbers. Those institutions date back certainly to the beginning of the 18th century, and in a few cases even earlier than that.
These guys need to get their story straight. At one point, they even started going off on how the Nazis used propaganda films in order to provide justification for their heinous crimes.
Psychiatrists produced propaganda movies known as the Nazi killing films, shown in all 5,300 theaters throughout Germany.
Meanwhile, the CCHR is making their own propaganda films in order to lead people into Scientology. Talk about hypocrites. If you ended up watching this documentary, you would think that psychiatry is responsible for all the problems of the 19th to 20th centuries. One ought to know who L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, really was. L. Ron Hubbard, born on March 13th, 1911, became a science fiction writer between the years 1934 to 1940, and actually holds the world record for most published books by a single author. He then joined the U.S. Navy in 1941. While Scientology will claim that he had many marvelous accomplishments within his Navy career, these have been deemed highly fabricated, as his service record debunks these claims. He then eventually became friends with a man named Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was a rocket scientist who started Jack Parsons Laboratories, which eventually became Jet Propulsion Laboratories, and claimed to have gotten special enlightenment in scientific research by partaking in sex magic rituals in the cult he was a part of, called the Ordo Templi Orientis. This group was founded by a British occultist named Aleister Crowley, who, at the time, was called the wickedest man in the world and had called himself the Beast 666. While talking about the topic of science fiction and Aleister Crowley, Crowley claimed to have summoned devil spirits throughout his lifetime, and one of them, which he had summoned in the late 19-teens, he called Lamb. Take a look at this rendition he made of this supposed devil spirit. Kind of looks like something else, doesn't it? It wasn't until the 1950s before the Gray started to be featured within pop culture. Kind of a strange coincidence, isn't it? Hubbard became a part of the OTO and eventually ran away with Jack Parsons' girlfriend, Sarah Northup, where they eventually had a child together. Eventually, Hubbard decided afterwards that he would start his own religion. That's when Hubbard wrote his book, Dianetics, which was published in 1950. This book became the foundation for what would eventually be Scientology, as a lot of the ideas Hubbard invented for this book eventually got incorporated into the doctrines of his system. One of the central practices of Scientology is what is called auditing, which is where one sits down and is asked a series of questions by someone called an auditor, similarly to priests in Roman Catholicism. The one taking the test holds what is called an e-meter, and allegedly, depending on how one responds to the questions, the person sends signals to the e-meter, and that produces the results that are measured for the test. All of the answers are put on file, which serves as a good way to blackmail and exploit those who have taken these tests. What they believe is happening is that you are clearing out your mind of past trauma, which they call Engrams. The goal for them is what they refer to as going clear, where they have removed engrams that inhibits their day-to-day lives. Is this based on science? Nah. If you thought that sounded interesting, you haven't seen nothing yet. Because now we will be looking at the central doctrine of Scientology, which is only revealed to members once they reach a high enough degree or rank within the cult. People who are on the lower levels appear to be ignorant to the fact that there is a creation story within Scientology. Meanwhile, there is evidence available, such as the manuscript Hubbard made in outlining this story, and even audio of him telling it. According to Scientology, 75 million years ago, there was once a planet that existed where civilization looked a lot like 1950s America.
Because people at that particular time and space were walking around in clothes which looked very remarkably like the clothes they wear at this very minute. And the cars they drove looked exactly the same, and the trains they ran looked the same, and the boats they had looked the same. Circa 1950, 1960, this civilization has simply copied our 100% because they were told to.
Within this planet came Xenu, a galactic space dictator.
And they had elected a fellow by the name of Xenu, could be spelled Xemu, to the supreme ruler. And they were about to unelect him, and he took the last moments he had in office to really goof the floof.
Xenu, due to his fear of overpopulation, decided to take the aliens from this 1950s American planet and freeze them in frozen alcohol and glycol.
So in they went, and the troops started slaughtering them, and then the troops, of course, were ordered out to get a hold of certain bodies of renegade troops, which were ordered to get certain bodies of bad troops, and they shot each other up and implanted each other and wiped it out. They were making billiard balls out of these places. They were imported. They were actually, the trick was to shoot somebody, disable somebody, very often a needle into a lung, and at the same time to hit him with frozen alcohol and glycol, which preparation is guaranteed to pick up a Thetan.
And loaded them onto DC-8 airplanes, which are actually spaceships.
And they threw them into collection points, boxed them up in boxes, threw them into space planes, which are the exact DC-8s. The DC-8 airplane is the exact copy of the space plane of that day. And no difference, except the DC-8 had fans, propellers on it, and the space plane didn't.
These spaceships that looked like DC-8 airplanes were taken to the planet Earth, where the aliens were dropped into volcanoes.
And they took these people in boxes and so forth, and they dumped them, and then they set off hydrogen bombs on the top of each primary volcano there is on this particular planet.
And the spirits of these aliens were vacuumed into spacecrafts controlled by Xenu.
And when they blew up, it blew the Thetans into the air, and after the bomb, an electronic ribbon, which also was a type of standing wave, was erected over the area. The tremendous winds of the planet blew every Thetan there was straight into those particular vacuum zones which had been created.
And these same spirits were then indoctrinated into the world's religions.
These were brought down, packed up, and put in front of projection machines, which with sound and color pictures first gave them the implant which you know as clearing course, and then a whole track implanted which you know as OT2. After this, however, about the remainder of the 36 days, which is the bulk of them, is taken up with a 3D supercolossal motion picture, which has to do with God, the devil, space opera, etc. They go 5 pictures to 5 words, and we have the full record of what it is. And
these alien spirits were then put into mankind, where this is the reason why we have such feelings as being mad, sad, frustrated, and all other negative emotions. Is there any evidence for Hubbard's claims? Well, if you believe that there is, I've got a bridge to sell you. This is what's truly behind the Citizens Commission of Human Rights, as they tell you that psychiatry is nothing but pseudoscience. It's ironic because Hubbard himself wrote a letter to the Medical Veterans Administration, Los Angeles, asking for medical treatment on October 15th, 1947. At one point in the letter, he said, "After trying and failing for 2 years to regain my equilibrium in civil life, I am utterly unable to approach anything like my own competence. My last physician informed me that it might be very helpful if I were to be examined and perhaps treated psychiatrically or even by a psychoanalyst. Toward the end of my service, I avoided out of pride any mental examinations, hoping that time would balance a mind which I had every reason to suppose was seriously affected. I cannot account for nor rise above long periods of moroseness and suicidal inclinations, and have newly come to realize that I must first triumph above this before I can hope to rehabilitate myself at all." With that being said, why does any of this matter? Well, that's because Scientology is probably one of the most abusive cults out there, with countless witnesses and testimonials coming out and warning against their behavior against their own members, and also the general public who speaks out against them. In their system, anyone who is labeled a quote-unquote suppressive person, someone who criticizes Scientology, is also quote-unquote fair game, meaning you can do anything to that person, even if it's outside of the law, and be justified within Scientology. Scientologists are constantly being told to give their organization loads of money, tell their members to isolate themselves from those that are not a part of the cult, are made servants where they literally receive cents per hour, and receive stalking and harassment if they are suspected of turning against their system. It's interesting because among the many celebrities that claim to believe in Scientology, the lead star of the feminist slop TV show called A Handmaid's Tale, Elizabeth Moss, who even directed 10 separate episodes, is a believer of Scientology. While she promotes a show that creates a dystopian world whose villains are supposed to be polygamist Christian nationalists that are impregnating women against their will, which is obviously slanderous and is completely unbiblical, as polygamy and even more so rape is strongly and seriously condemned by Scripture, Scientology has been coercing women within the Sea Org division to have abortions, as you can read from this SALON article. Link in the description. The hypocrisy is just simply incredible. The question is, does the CCHR, and by extent Scientology, have a point about psychiatry? Is the practices found within the modern practice the be-all and end-all of all rational thought? The answer is simply no. It just can't be, as psychiatry in of itself is something that man has created. While there are many diagnoses that can help those who are struggling with mental diseases which causes impediments to their lives, there are also times where people can get false diagnoses and be provided prescriptions which can even make things worse. The last thing I'm saying is that medication does not serve a time and a place. Some Christians might, but there is something to be said in the Bible for emergency medicine. The scriptures even distinguishes between good medicine and quote-unquote bad medicine, showing that not all medicine is evil. The King James Version distinctly uses the word apothecary in at least 4 separate instances, one of which was spoken by Moses in Exodus 30 verse 25, saying, "And thou shalt make it an oil of holy ointment, an ointment compound after the art of the apothecary. It shall be an holy anointing oil." The word apothecary, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is a person who prepared and sold medicines and drugs. There is a distinction between medicine and sorceries. As many will point out, the Greek word for this type of magic is called pharmakia, which obviously has connections to pharmacy and pharmaceuticals. While the two words could appear to be similar on the surface, one could see apothecary medicine for emergencies or sustainability, while pharmakia is used for purposes such as mystical experiences and as a vice or an escape from the responsibilities of this natural world. While some drugs can definitely keep a person's condition stable, such as elderly people suffering through Alzheimer's or dementia in reducing intense pain and providing comfort, other drugs can be highly addictive and can have long-lasting negative effects and difficult withdrawal periods, in which, if you ever decide to get off medication, please consult your doctor or psychiatrist before you do so, to make sure that that is the best choice for you to be making, or otherwise how to do so properly. It would be fair to say that not everyone needs to be on pharmaceutical drugs produced by companies meant to treat their patient rather than cure their patient. In the place of sobriety, a good diet, physical exercise, less doom scrolling, and a personal relationship with God. And the longer you can practically sustain a healthy life without using such drugs is ideal. On the other hand, according to the Bible, one must consider the fact that the majority of Jesus' miracles involved exorcisms. Time and time again, the scriptures detail people who were possessed with spirits that were a hindrance to their physical and mental health. In one example, In Luke 13, verse 11, it says, "And behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bowed together, and could in no wise lift up herself." In another instance, in Matthew 17, verses 14 to 16, it reads, "And when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him, and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is lunatic, and sore vexed. For oftentimes he falleth into the fire, and oft into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him." Where Jesus had then healed the child, in which he told his disciples in verse 21, "This kind can come forth by nothing but by prayer and fasting." In 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 14, Paul tells us to comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak, be patient toward all men. Not every instance of mental illness is necessarily a sign of devil possession. And not every person who is possessed is going to be like someone from a Hollywood movie. And it's important to discern the differences from the Word of God. The root word for psychiatry is psyche, which is Greek for soul. If the whole point of modern psychiatry is to find out what is the problems of the soul, how are they supposed to do that when they don't acknowledge that man has a soul? I think anyone can agree that there are problems with the practice of psychiatry because you can't separate man from the process. One modern instance that I believe psychiatry has caused more harm than good is diagnosing very young children with ADHD and other learning comprehension disorders. When you have a kid who can't sit still in a class that was designed in the 1910s for factory workers, and then that same child would rather be playing with his friends, especially after he's been given a bunch of sugars and candies and letting him watch stupid cartoons, that's not a psychiatric problem. That's called a child. And then you're going to start drugging them? I don't think so. Man in of himself is flawed and sinful. And to act as though we can separate that and use purely logical and empirical practices to perfect the personal decisions of others is not attainable. There then must be something better than man that needs to be able to establish what is the truth from error. In my personal experience, before I accepted Jesus into my life, I was not doing so well. And it wasn't until after I got saved when I started to see things turn around. At one point, before salvation, I realized that the things the world was offering me provided no fulfillment. I also realized that we are living in a society that is heavily influenced by corporations and foreign and domestic influences that want us constantly seeking instant gratification in order to make us weak and pathetic. Without God in my life, it was hard to know what was real and fake, truth from lies. I got introduced to the King James Bible just a few years ago, and I realized the power in having the preserved words of God in my life. I saw incredible growth from that point on. If I had not been introduced to it, this would have kept me in a relative and confused worldview that even many professing Christians are in today. I finally came to the end of myself and recognized that I was someone who had transgressed against God, and called out to him and asked for him to be merciful to me, a sinner. I accepted the price that Jesus Christ paid for me. And even with how terrible the world is turning out to be, I have hope that God has preserved me from the times ahead. And you can have that assurance too. As you can probably tell, things are not getting much better out there. And with so many voices online giving you their take on what is truth from lies, or real news from fake news, it becomes almost impossible to tell the difference. That's why it's important to commit yourself to an authority that is not going to be changing with the wind, but something that is solid and true. In Matthew 7, verses 24 to 27, Jesus tells a parable, saying, "Therefore whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house. And it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house. And it fell, and great was the fall of it." How about considering the fact that there is wisdom in dedicating your life to understanding a book that has been tried and tested unlike any of the thousands of other books you could waste your time on, rather than being just another one of those people who are ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth? Don't trust in Scientology. And don't trust in man-made psychiatry either. Trust Jesus Christ to save your soul today.